today the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman held her fifth and last press conference on the giant 20 lakh crore economic package that the Prime Minister had announced a few days ago. Today she announced a 40,000 crore additional funds for MNREGA and 300 crore MNREGA person days. Borrowing limit for states also raised from 3 to 5% of GSDP. Private players are going to be allowed in public sector enterprises. Threshold for insolvency proceedings has been raised to 1 crore, and tech-driven education is being given a big push with 1 TV channel per class from classes 1 to 12. Now that we know exactly what the government is spending on over the last few days, the government has released data on what it actually is spending on and what this 20 lakh crore package is. The actual money that the government is spending in this 20 lakh crore package comes to about 2 lakh crores. That's the actual government spending in the relief packages. And that table there shows you, based on every tranche that has been announced by the Finance Minister, how we and other organizations like HSBC Bank have come to this figure. It amounts to about 1% of the GDP. So it actually, in terms of real spending, doesn't amount to 10% of the GDP as had been claimed. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, the chairperson of Biocon India Limited, joining us. Harish Damodaran, the agriculture editor of the Indian Express. Mihir Sharma, senior fellow with the Observer Research Foundation, also with us tonight. Kiran Shaw, to you first. Ma'am, you tweeted this afternoon that you're disappointed at the lack of bold measures in the stimulus packages. Don't think that demand will be created. So do you feel that this was the time basically to put money in the hands of people, to put money in the hands of various sectors, rather than looking at bigger structural reforms?
So, Nidhi, if you want to stimulate economic revival, then you know that it has to involve both supply and demand. Right now, what the government has done is basically just improved liquidity, and they are hoping that, with all the measures that they have announced for extended credit, longer moratorium, and other such, incentives that they have announced for the MSMEs and others, they feel that this is going to stimulate supply all over again. But, I think what you need to understand is that if you do not create demand, then this supply is not going to be worth it. And that's what I worry about. This is a stimulus for economic survival, not economic revival. So I think, we need to be very serious about wanting the economy to get back in a strong way. And whilst one of the suggestions I gave was, why don't you look at reducing GST significantly, just like how the UK has done. UK has actually removed VAT. So even if you don't want to remove GST, at least slash GST and create that demand, and do it for a short period of time, do it for 3 to 6 months. And that is enough to start, at least incentivizing demand. But if you don't prod demand, then I fear that all these great measures that have been announced will not go to much use in terms of reviving the economy. Well, Secondly, I also want to say that, yes, I think they've done a lot for agriculture, which is good. That is both, it is kind of a good set of reforms that hopefully will be transformational for the agri sector. MSMEs have got a lot of measures and, incentives announced, but MSMEs are also helpless without the larger industry that depends on them to get the right kind of benefits. So I haven't seen that being announced.
Can I ask you your thoughts on today's lockdown measures that were announced, Kiran Shaw? What do you think of the easing of restrictions, but also the fact that, an essential economic activity like flying is still not been allowed? So are we heading in the right direction? Do we still need to do more to relax this lockdown? What do you see as the potential impact of this?
So I think at least they are allowing a large number of economic activities in the sort of the green and orange zones, which I think is a good way of at least starting to lift the lockdown, because we can't have an extended lockdown anymore, for the simple reason that this is a disease, a virus, a viral pandemic that we need to now know how to deal with, how to manage and get on with economic activity with. Otherwise, it's going to create a huge economic disaster for the country. And that's what most economies are also finding, that this is a pandemic that now, okay, we've been through a series of lockdowns. The first one was to stop the spread, and that was very essential. The second one was also to get into a state of preparedness. That was also very essential. The third one was getting us into an unlocking mode. And now we have to really go out and unlock the economy as much as we can. And I hope that by June, we should be able to basically get most of the economic activity
back on track,
starting again. But I think we really can't, and I just feel that we have to be very watchful. The surveillance and safeguards have to be implemented and executed very stringently. I think it's about, test, track and trace, test, trace and treat, because that's what we really need to do.
That is the big question. There's a big hole actually in what some in the methods that some states are adopting. There are some states that are not even releasing enough data or are not doing enough testing, and I'll get to that in just a bit. But Mihir, I just wanted to ask you, firstly, on now that we've seen the sort of 5 press conferences of the finance minister, now HSBC, others, all of us have kind of got together and seen what the actual, cost, cash out from the government side is. It actually comes to about 1% of the GDP and not 10% of the GDP. It comes to just over 2 lakh crores. Your thoughts first on that, Mihir?
I think it's not surprising at all. The first relief package that was announced at the time of the original lockdown also had an actual cash outgo that was a tiny fraction. Maybe it was 0.3% of GDP, whereas that was claimed to be 1.2 or 1.3% of GDP. This is exactly how the government has been going about things. It has been overstating the GDP impact in terms of cash outgo. I want to sort of emphasize, however, that in actual structure, they are being careful, and that is because that is for a very good reason. They do not, as a government, currently have the resources to actually spend the kind of 10% of GDP number that the Prime Minister originally promised. If we had spent that much money, given the fact that we do not have enough taxes coming in right now, we would have had to borrow it. And if the government had had to borrow something of that size, then our credit rating would have been downgraded, which means that every time subsequently we would have wanted to borrow more, it would have been far more expensive. It would have been a big jump in terms of the expense of all future borrowing. So the government had to be very careful, had to take the long view, and I think they've done that and it's been very wise.
Perhaps then that should be honestly stated right at the beginning, Mihir. I think that's the point, rather than talking about a big 20 lakh crore package and actually telling people what it is. And Harish Damodaran, that brings us to the point of how you look at the economic measures that have been announced, particularly for the agriculture sector. As Kiran Shaw said, that has been largely welcomed, but again on migrants, migrants are not happy with just getting ration. They're saying, we need actual cash in hand. And when Mihir Sharma says that the government doesn't have that kind of money for spending 10% of the GDP, he's right. But then when you see 20,000 crores being spent on a new parliament vista, you have to kind of wonder where the priorities are.
If you ask me, the only substantial stimulus, if you see right from the beginning, I mean, from the from the time of the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana onwards, I think it has basically been this free grain, this additional 5 kg per person per month. That has been quite substantial. And if you ask me, including like extending it to migrants, this thing. And the second one has been, I think, this 40,000 crore extra which you're giving for MNREGA. So the irony is both these, MNREGA as well as National Food Security Act, is a legacy of UPA. Okay, I would have liked to see more action on what has been the present government's legacy, JAM, the Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile. Where are the cash transfers? I mean, just 500 rupees for Jan Dhan, women Jan Dhan accounts per month. I would have liked to see more cash transfers now. fine. I mean, see, food was very important. Okay, and the great thing is, we've had enough food stocks. Not only of rice and wheat, but also of pulses. I think this is the first ever national calamity in India where you've not had any food riots. Right, you've not had any hoarding. If you look at 1972 famine, if you look at the Hindi movies of the 70s, etc., there was no hoarding, no scarcity, supplies. I mean, people got their milk and everything. It was just a question of ensuring that people had the money to go and buy. I would have liked, this government's. After all, its legacy has been Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, seeded bank accounts, and this thing. Why did you create this jam infrastructure? It was for this particular day, right? I mean, what stopped? Say, for example, you take 10 crore families, which will be we can call them poor and lower middle class. You can make it maybe if you had transferred 5,000 rupees per month, and you had told, I don't think you would have had this migrant crisis in the first place, right?
Probably.
You would not have had this thing. So it's very ironical that this government is depending on the UPA legacy of MNREGA and NFSA, which it actually rubbished,
Yeah, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, that brings us then sort of to the important question of, as you restart the economy, now, the labor is gone. I mean, much of it has. So how are we going to restart the economy in the absence of those people who have to work to get it back up?
Well, I completely agree with Harish when he says that, look, we should have actually given much more in the hands of the migrant labor than what we even are trying to promise to them. 500 is neither here nor there. You need to give them at least 5,000. And I think this was also an opportunity for us to actually, in some way, start with a minimum basic income model, at least at the very lowest strata of society. And I think this is a lost opportunity as far as I'm concerned, because we've seen the fate and the plight of the migrant labor. This does constitute a very large part of our informal labor, and as we all know, almost 75% of our total workforce is informal labor, and they need to be looked after. We need to give them some kind of a security. And I think this was an opportunity.
There's another important point you raised today, which is that the healthcare sector has been shortchanged, as you put it. You said no stimulus for hospitals who've had to bear increased operating costs. That's true, actually. I mean, this is when we need to be focused on getting our healthcare system in order, but we haven't.
Yeah, so Nidhi, in fact, I was looking forward to actually the statements made by the finance minister that we're going to up our healthcare spend. So I was waiting to see what was going to happen. But actually, there was no mention of the private healthcare sector. And let me tell you, the private healthcare sector is in a very dire position because the footfall of patients because of the COVID crisis has come down by almost 80%. And now, the cost of operating a hospital is much higher than what it used to be, because you need to invest in protective apparel and other, protective gear throughout the hospital. Now in the ICUs, you need to get people to wear PPEs and things like that. And with that kind of investment, they are struggling. I can tell you that. So I think the healthcare sector felt very shortchanged, especially, given the fact that they actually rose to the challenge when the COVID crisis hit. Many of them have actually, given a lot of their time and resources for fighting COVID. And finally, they all feel that they've got nothing for them
from this. Mihir, I just wanted to ask you a quick last question then on how you see the next few months, panning out. And again, I ask you about this particular version of the lockdown. Do you think it's a welcome change from lockdown 3, that we will have to find a way to live with this virus, but we also need to get other things moving as well, including air travel?
I think that all looking at it the other way, it's the wrong way to look at it. No airline is going to be able to operate the way that it did in the pre-COVID world, not as long as the virus is with us. If tomorrow the airlines can come out with, in collaboration with the Civil Aviation Ministry, in looking at best practices abroad, can come out with a method of ensuring that people are comfortable traveling, of ensuring that the various public health considerations about the spread of the virus are taken care of, then maybe we can think about reopening the airlines. The fact is, everything has to be subordinate to the public health considerations, because regardless of what the economic hit of a continued half lockdown may be, the economic hit of a virus that is spreading uncontrollably, particularly to areas of India that do not have the proper healthcare, will be a different order of magnitude. So we have to keep in our planning, we have to keep the fact that remains the number one priority.
Kiran Shaw,
and if we can't come out with plans, with SOPs for how to operate things, then we cannot open them.
Absolutely. The crucial thing is to have those SOPs in place. Kiran Shaw, would you agree with what Mihir is saying?
There's no debate on that. I mean, obviously you can't be reckless and just open up. Yeah. That's why I said that you have to have some very strong surveillance and rapid response measures if you actually see some outbreak somewhere. But, Mihir is also very right. I mean, we are a vast country. I think some states have got good public health and primary health care infrastructure. Others don't. You've seen some of the southern states have done very well. Kerala, Karnataka, and Andhra and Telangana to a certain extent. They've all started, and I'm sure even Tamil Nadu is capable of doing that. But I think we need to make sure that our public health infrastructure is improved as a result of this impact of COVID. I would have liked to have seen that. We need to invest in public health and primary health care, because that's what many countries in Asia have done, and
Absolutely.
That is how they've been able to keep COVID.
I think we as voters also have to pin down political leaders and make healthcare a political issue, an election issue. And Mihir, by the way, your point about flying is well taken. If that was actually to apply to public transport across the board, what one doesn't understand is why interstate buses are allowed, a number of trains are running, but planes are not allowed as of now. So, a lot of things don't square off with what's already been announced. But thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight and giving us some perspective on today's developments. Much more to talk about through the week as well. See you again tomorrow. Good night.